The Japanese people have this real reverence with timber and nature, and you know, the design of the temples, they're not overly fussy, they're beautiful, but they're quite simple. And you often see these blackened timbers against the light coloured timbers. There's some great angles, and again, you know, it's kind of hard to explain. I think I am often influenced design-wise by osmosis rather than being fully aware of what the inspirations are. But when I look at this table and I drew the design, I looked at it and I just thought Shiga, you know, it's a favourite area of ours up there, and just that Japanese strength and simplicity of design and treating the timbers with the utmost respect, you know, not trying to overwork timber. And I think this table's has done that, you know, even little things like instead of pitching the end of that central beam in the way you normally would think it would go that way, but I've reversed it, and it's something I'll see up there with balance all the time. They know where to put an angle and they know how to make it look and feel great. Okay, this is quite an interesting design. It's a commission for one of our great customers that we've been doing work for many years, and we'll call him John to protect the names of the innocent. So John always likes to get involved in the design process, often gives me a sketch or an idea that he's got, and then we, you know, basically work together, design something up and make it. So in this situation, we had these beautiful Sheoak boards, which I'll show you later, but he had a friend actually that was going to design something for him, which I was, you know, wasn't that keen on, to be honest. But anyway, that didn't eventuate, and he eventually sent me some pictures of a black tubular steel base with a timber top, but in this sort of geometric design, I guess. And I looked at that and thought, well, steels, although we do a bit of stainless steel work, painted steel's not really our thing. So I suggested I'll design something up using timber, and to juxtapose the colour of against the beautiful brightness of the Sheoak, I thought let's stain some Jarrah. So basically, it had to be quite a strong construction because you can see, you know, the way this all works. It couldn't be flimsy because it's got a big tabletop sitting on top. So this was all 6 by 4 inch Jarrah out of the old Meriden wheat bins. So big chunky bits of timber. And I redesigned them from the tubular look, just put some nice tapers into the timber, and then we cut some miters through, using dominoes, but essentially 4 mortise and tenons, 2 each side on those joints and those joints. And this one here has a big tenon going right through here, or locating domino right through there, and then a bolt that actually connects it all together. And the tubular steel one had this kind of big box through the middle, which I didn't like, and so I thought let's just put a nice natural edge piece of Sheoak through the centre of the table. And because that was just in between the 2 legs, we needed quite a bit of strength up here, so I ended up creating a whole frame up the top, and again using these big mortise and tenons to support this top, because it's a 3 metre top by 1.2 metres. And yeah, it needed a lot of strength and a lot of rigidity. So what we've ended up with something is it's actually pretty heavy, but it's super strong and rigid, and you know, you could park a Harley Davidson on it. I reckon David probably try and do that. But yeah, and then I've black stained all the timber, so it seems a bit sacrilegious, but the Jarrah, the red and the orange gets a bit too close together. The black kind of gives it that nice juxtaposition, but with the stain you can probably see, you still see the grain through it, so it's clearly a timber. We call it ebonising. It's basically staining it black, but that's what ebonising is. And yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. It's just a really nice, I guess the black against the Sheoak, it just makes that Sheoak pop out. Sheoak's such a beautiful timber. Has these little locating pins on the top. So when the top sits on, it locates in these 2 central positions. And then around the table, I hand make these little guys, and they're just a little toggle. Let's see where I've disguised where they all are. There they are there. So all through this frame, these fix to the top, and it just means you can spin them to the side, lift the top off, but they'll lock it on. But what they allow is for the tabletop to expand and contract. So it's located on this central pin, but a top this wide is going to expand and contract probably, up to ½ an inch a year from summer to winter. So if you don't allow for that expansion and contraction, something's going to give, and it's usually the timber finding a weak point and it'll crack. So by using this method of connecting the top to the base, that doesn't happen. So in these end frames were quite tricky to make. There's obviously 2 at each end, and because of the miter and you've got a point cut off here, it's difficult to clamp them. So I basically had to make up these blocks, and I glued them on, actually on the bottom, so that, and you'll see that I've got some construction photos and a little video, so that we could actually clamp those miters together, because otherwise you just can't do it. So these, they go on that way, and then I could clamp back like that, and this one down here was underneath there, like that, and then that way I glued another one in opposing up here, and that gave me 2 locations to be able to clamp those miters together. Because they've got the 4 tenons going in, they're quite stiff to push together, so you can't just tap them with a rubber mallet or like I often would do. They all had to be clamped and epoxied together. But what we've ended up with, so I glue them on with paper, so once the glue's all gone off in my joints, I can just tap those off, sand them up, and you don't know they've ever been on there. So they're kind of like a temporary brace in the construction process. So it's just a little trick you can use when there's no apparent place to put a G-clamp. You can create a spot by attaching little blocks like that. So John got super lucky with this one because he's a great lover of Sheoak, and in fact initially he called me. He had an old Sheoak tabletop he wanted me to repurpose as this dining table, but it was just too small, and to be honest, the Sheoak wasn't that fantastic. And one of our local farmers that goes along the riverbanks whenever a tree comes down and recovers the timber, he's probably one of our best suppliers, and because often on the riverbanks the trees just get old and fall over. Well, this was a huge old Sheoak tree, and what was unique about this was the length of the trunk. I mean, you don't get many Sheoaks where you can get a 3 metre long, 400mm wide, quarter sawn piece of Sheoak, and that's what these are. And the quarter sawing, as it cuts through the medullary ray, you can see the medullary rays on the end. So medullary rays are in all timbers, but in the oaks they're predominant, you can see them. And when you cut them on the quarter, they show themselves, it's like a 3-dimensional sort of fish scale effect. And this Sheoak's just a great example of that fish scale effect. And of course, because we had the whole log, we could book match the boards. These 3 boards all came out right next to each other. Obviously can't book match all 3 because we wanted a natural edge on one side, but we've book matched 2 and the other one just blends in beautifully. So they are beautiful, and always with Sheoak, there's a fire. It's always been through fires, and they always have a burn. So there was a burn here, which we could have cut out through the book match, but it would have made the table a bit narrower. John, being a lover of timber, said, "No, leave that in. It's all just part of the scarring and the history of the tree and the timber." So we've ended up with this most beautiful 3 metre long, 1.2 metre wide Sheoak cut quarter sawn. Very, very rare. If you're a woodworker, you'll understand. So it's been an absolute pleasure to work with it. It's just so stable, Sheoak, and it's very even grain. So even it takes an oil beautifully. This is all oil finished. I've been doing pretty much all oil finishes out of my workshop here for many years now, at least a decade. And often oil finishes can be a bit patchy because the timber will have hard and soft spots within the tree, but the Sheoak seems to be really even. This is still going to get one more coat of oil. Not completely finished yet, but you can see it's just beautiful. just such a nice finish. And the natural edges again, you know, with Sheoaks, they can be quite wavy and wonky, but these are fairly straight. So you get that beautiful natural edge, but it doesn't make it a weird thing to sit around. It's still a nice dining table. So yeah, really, really pleased with the way this has come up, and you know, as I say, probably the nicest, longest, widest pieces of Sheoak I've come across in 36 or 7 years of making furniture. So it's really nice, and the people are great customers, so it's really nice to be able to produce something that, you know, it's going to be special for them. John's told me that this will be the last dining table. You know, they've got a nice place overlooking the water, and they just wanted a really beautiful table. It'll be their forever table, which will get handed down to their children, and probably their children's children and their children's children's children. All going well. We all live that long. So anyway, it's really exciting to be finishing off a piece like this. And he walks away.